The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Cut. Cut is a peer-to-peer social betting platform that's US-based and available in 40 states. Head to cut.com, that's KUTC.com, and use promo code SGPN for a 10% deposit bonus. We're also brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. Play their fantasy pick'em for a chance to win 100 times your money in NBA, NHL, college basketball, and more. Sign up today using promo code SGPN to get a 100% deposit match. We're also brought to you by Hall of Fame Bets, the sports fan research platform for parlays, player props, and game lines. Download the app or visit HOPENY.com. Use code SGPN to get 50% off your first month and start making smarter bets today. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently Friday afternoon, roughly 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, March 29th. I'm your host, Scott Reichel, and we're going to switch things up a little bit today because we already did the semifinal episode for the men's side a couple hours ago, and now it is time to get into the actual women's final, as you have a pretty fun matchup between Collins and Rybakina, so we're going to cover that match. But, as all of you know, I tend to follow the men's tour more than the women's, so I brought in some help. I brought in a WTA expert. You can find him on FTN Bets and on BetUS. Noops Christenson, thanks for coming on the show. How you doing?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, Scott. I love talking tennis. Always good to find somebody to do it with. I just wish more people cared. Tennis is the greatest betting sport in the world. 20 hours a day, 11 months a year. You've got head-to-head matchups. You don't have to handicap a whole team. It's honestly a lot like handicapping boxing. You know, people aren't throwing punches necessarily, but it's a lot about combinations. It's a lot about strengths. It's a lot about matchups. So let's talk about it. Let's share some wisdom with the people and see if we can grow the tennis betting community.
Yeah, I think my favorite part about tennis is the one-on-one or the one-on-one aspect of it. Yes, I know you can do doubles and stuff like that, but the point is there are less variables involved. So if you do find an angle, you can capitalize on that, and it's definitely more noticeable when you're actually watching the matches in particular. So I've always been a big tennis fan, runs in the family, and as a result, I've been doing this show for a couple of years. But thanks for coming on. And since I brought you on as the WTA expert, I'm going to let you go first. What exactly were some of your takeaways so far from this event?
It's a really fun tournament. I love Miami. Indian Wells in Miami, this is a really nice time of year. I love the 2-week-long tournaments. It gives players time to be healthy. So I think you get some more honest and kind of straightforward matches. And I think generally what I took away from sort of a Miami standpoint, I'm curious to see if you saw the same thing on the men's side. The courts didn't look quite as slow this year. Usually this is a little bit of a slower tournament. The big servers, power players don't do as well because they struggle to hit through the ball. But you start to go quarter by quarter. Iga Swiatek gets taken out by a Katerina Alexandrova. Alexandrova, one of the best indoor players on fast courts. Again, a power player with a big serve. Surprised to see her push that hard and beat somebody in Swiatek, who generally is great on these kind of courts. Jessica Pegula, tough to see her get knocked out. Starting to really be worried about her. Just doesn't look like she's 100%. I hope maybe she takes a week or two off with some smaller events. Coco Gauff still struggling to win in the U.S. for whatever reason. Did great at the U.S. Open, but these two tournaments have always been tough for her. And everything else has been good. It's nice to see Maria Sakkari back to playing good tennis. And I think this final is going to be fantastic. Elena Rybakina, one of the 3-4 best players in the women's tour, just head and shoulders ahead of everyone else. Goes against Danielle Collins, a veteran American player who has done well at this tournament every year. So it's a really exciting matchup.
Yeah, definitely I'm looking forward to seeing it, especially based on how Collins kind of surprisingly announced her retirement, or at least her plans to retire, after that brutal loss against Iga in Australia, where she had her on the ropes, unfortunately could not close the deal, and then kind of surprised everybody that she was going to move on to the next chapter in her career. You mentioned Gauff and how she's been struggling a bit ever since she won the U.S. Open. The more I watch her play, the less I fully comprehend how she won a U.S. Open. Just looking at how, I can't even describe it. It's like the forehand self-destructs. There's a lack of confidence there. The serving's always hit or miss. I kind of just want to talk a bit more about Coco because we know what the upside can be. We know that she's the future face of American tennis, either for men or women's, because American men's tennis hasn't won a Grand Slam in about 20 years. So I just want to ask for your overall thoughts on Coco. We know that initially the pairing with Gilbert as her coach resulted in immediate dividends because she was great to end 2023. Not so much in 2024. Do you have any particular reasons why you think that the success hasn't carried over from the end of 2023?
I think a lot of her strength comes from just her physical fitness. She is one of the best players, is constantly moving around and get to balls. When you get to the US Open, it is a brutal point of the season. These players have been playing tennis for 9+ months. It can be hot in the US, in New York City. I love going every year. It's one of my favorite events. I go every year for the first couple days. And I think her fitness gives her an advantage in that event because she's a little fresher than everybody else. But that's not to discredit her overall talent. She is great, but you hit on the two problems that she's had in her career so far and was able to figure out for the fortnight there in the US Open. Number one, it's that forehand. It's been weak. It's been inaccurate. She just really struggles for whatever reason to hit those shots. But was able to do it in the US Open. We saw her hit a lot of high leverage, important forehands throughout that tournament and in the final against Sabalenka. And then her serve was fantastic in the US Open, and it hasn't really been close to that. So I don't know what's changed in her game. If again, she's trying to retool a little bit more here, but I am worried that she's struggled again to hit her forehand like we've seen in the past, and the serve is not near the level we saw late last year.
Yeah, that's kind of the same thoughts that I had. It's unfortunate. Hopefully she can turn it around. Still a lot of tennis to be played this year. You still have 3 Grand Slams coming up, so we'll see what she can do moving forward. I thought the recent success of Sakari was pretty fascinating because she was a mess for several months, and apparently the secret was getting rid of her coach. So I don't know what the new coach is doing or what the exact plan was, but as soon as she decided to get a new voice in the locker room, so to speak, she immediately made the final in Indian Wells and immediately made a deep run again in Miami. Did come up short, though, as she ended up losing in a bit of a heartbreaker there to Rybakina in the quarters. But you have any thoughts on Sakari? Was it just as simple as switching coaches?
I don't know if it's the coach, but something really did change. If you go back and watch her performances, Miami and Indian Wells, a lot more aggressive tennis. Generally, for the beginning of the season, she'd be playing very passively. She's not a player to attack net, but she's someone that earlier in the season was hitting into big, wide areas, not trying to play with margin, not really going after points. And I think it's one of the hardest parts of tennis when you try to figure out, am I going down the line or am I going down the middle? Am I going to really try to push left and right and be more aggressive, or am I going to be a little bit more safe, a little bit more vanilla? So I think Zachary has really been more aggressive, and that's better for her. Again, she has the fitness to continue to return balls and get good positions, but doesn't always take advantage of those positions after she's earned them. There's something to be said for getting to a point where you can win that point, but then you actually have to hit that shot. And she's finally starting to do that.
Yeah, we saw a little bit of mental toughness issues once again with her in Indian Wells, but she was able to close the deal against Goff. She arguably could have won that in straight sets. Then she let it slip away, but she ended up rallying to win the third set. And at that point forward, she ran into an absolute buzzsaw with Iga in the final. It happens. It is what it is. But then
Yeah.
she responded well by making the quarters of Miami. I'm going to ask you, though, since there were a couple other players who made some deep runs. Azarenka almost made it to the final, losing to Rybakina in 3 sets with a final set breaker there. Alexandrova, you mentioned before, was in good form, ended up beating Iga, ended up beating Pagula, and she ended up losing to Collins. Anybody else stand out to you, either for good or for bad, in this event?
Yeah, flipping through, Azarenka is always really interesting. She has a couple tournaments a year where she just really crushes players. An older veteran player, it's still surprising to me that she's out playing on the tour. I'm happy to see her, but you can see that the age really gets to her against some of these younger players. So that was good to see. Yulia Putintseva kind of comes out of nowhere to win 4 matches in this tournament. As someone who is generally near the hundreds, kind of outside of the top 100, not one of the better players, was interesting seeing her make her run. And I think really the big question comes down to Arena Sabalenka. Had to deal with a lot of personal off-court nonsense with the death of her ex-boyfriend, basically just before the tournament. It's hard to say whether it was that affected her or not, but just didn't look right for these couple matches here going forward. Again, she is one of those 3 or 4 players in the WTA that is head and shoulders above everyone else. So I'm curious to see whether she can snap back into playing good tennis, get refocused, or if this is going to be a problem going forward.
Yeah, that's kind of the main thing for me too. You're kind of hoping, of course, that she'd be able to overcome it. I was shocked she was actually playing in Miami. I know some people, when it comes to grieving, need a distraction. Some people choose to work when they're dealing with some type of difficult situations, but she decided that she needed the distraction, I guess, and that tennis would keep her busy. And unfortunately, her game has not exactly looked that sharp ever since she won in Australia earlier this year. I do want to ask you, though, when just looking at the overall draw, just quickly, just going down the line, you mentioned a couple of players here. For the sake of Americans, I just know that Goff once again did lose in the round of 16. Madison Keys lost in the round of 16. You mentioned Pegula has been a bit underwhelming. She did lose in the quarters. Not exactly a great time for American tennis players, or at least American tennis fans, rooting for some home country players to have some success. You have any thoughts on which player might potentially be the next to break through?
I think Pegula in golf will be fine. I think golf is trying to retool some stuff. Again, as the season goes on, she's going to be better and better. Pegula just needs to get healthy. She has always been one of my favorite players, especially on hard courts. I expect her, again, hopefully to get healthy and be good. I will say there's a little bit of optimism about Emma Navarro. We had an interesting match. She was able to beat Pegula in the Battle of Billionaire Babies, if you didn't know. Jessica Pegula, the daughter of the owner of the Buffalo Sabres, and I can't remember if he owns the Bills as well, but one of the wealthiest people, Navarro as well. So it was interesting to see that. But Navarro has really been on an upward arc this season, just looks better and better, physically looks more strong, is playing smarter tennis. I think there's some optimism there for her. But overall, I think it's going to be okay. I think that, at the top, Pegula and Goff give the U.S. women a chance to win a lot of tournaments. I think there's a possibility one of them, again, wins the U.S. Open or sneaks in maybe one of those big Masters tournaments, either whether it be Cincinnati or the Canadian Cup. So it's been a tough start to the season, but I'm still pretty optimistic about the top two and see an up-and-comer Navarro that I think could really push deep late into some of these big events.
Yeah, of course, I meant no disrespect to Collins, who's in the final as an American, but the point is she announced she's going to retire, so I kind of meant some of the younger players moving forward. But
Yeah.
anyway, I think that's basically all I have to actually talk about for the tournament so far. You have anything else you want to add? I know you mentioned that the overall court speeds were a bit faster than they anticipated. I always think Miami looks like a fast court because it's right after Indian Wells, which is one of the slower courts on the entire tour. But you have any other takeaways from either the I'd say atmosphere in Miami, the weather? I know a decent amount of men's players had some issues collapsing. Berrettini, for example, Kaza in overall qualifying ended up having an issue as well. Did you notice anything with regard to either fitness or fatigue issues for some of the players?
I think this happens every year at this event. Again, Miami, it is early enough in the year. It's not too hot down there, but you always have a lot of humidity. And the way the stadium is built, it seems like it just captures a lot of heat. It's something players complain about every year, but it didn't look like it was as bad as we've seen, say, in the Australian Open and some of those particularly hot events where you've got guys taking breaks. So it's something to put a pin in. And what I would say is, as you're going back and look at this tournament to try to figure out what to do with those results and how they impact the future, be sure you go match by match and just try to figure out, again, was it a spot where, again, somebody like Berrettini just kind of broke down physically? I don't think that you really need to hold that loss against him going forward. So just be careful with some of the results here and make sure you understand the context.
Yep, I agree with that. But of course, that's going to lead us to one match that's left in this actual event. Should be a fun one. Before we actually get into any of that, though, do you want to take a quick word from our sponsors? We're also brought to you by Cut. Cut is a peer-to-peer social betting platform that's U.S.-based and available in 40 states. Peer-to-peer social betting is a new and better way to bet directly against your friends or other users on sports, politics, pop culture, and other events with verifiable outcomes, plus a ton of social features that give it the feel of a betting social network. Cut offers lower vig and fully customizable odds so you can create your own bets. Cut handles the payment side of things, so you never have to worry about chasing down your money. Social features include group chats, betting leaderboards, head-to-head history, user profiles, fan groups, and more. And they also have great rewards. Get cash back every single time you bet against your friends or other users. So download Cut today in the App Store or over at cut.com. That's Kutt, and use promo code SGPN for a 10% deposit bonus. We're also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the place to play fantasy sports because it is the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. They have great pick'em games. For example, you can pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total into their upcoming games. You can win up to 100 times your money in a single night. Pick between 2 and 5 players to build a pick'em entry. And you can also make rivals picks, which pits 2 players against each other. So you can pick which player you think might have more points, for example, in an NBA game. But a reminder that you should also join Underdog Fantasy because they have a lot of very fun markets for tennis. They have, for example, breaks of serve. They have aces. They have a lot of fun tennis options to make matches more interesting, and I recommend you joining
the platform in order to take advantage of those opportunities. So sign up today with promo code SGPN to get your first deposit doubled up to $100, as well as an instant pick'em special. Visit underdogfantasy.com or find them on the App Store. And don't forget to register with the promo code SGPN to get your first deposit doubled up to $100, as well as an instant pick'em special. Must be 18 plus and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit www.ncpgambling.org.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened so far in Miami on the women's side. Now it is time to actually get into the preview of the title match between Collins and Rybakina. Now, Rybakina is a decent favorite in this match as she is around minus 175 on the money line, while Collins is around about plus 150, plus 155. You're looking at the over-under being set at 22.5. The over is even money. The under is minus 120. Rybakina minus 2.5 games is minus 110. Collins plus 2.5 is minus 110 as well. The match to go to 3 sets is plus 130. Match to end in straight sets is minus 160. Rybakina to win in straight sets is available at plus 155. Collins to win a set is minus 185. And if you want to get really bold, Collins to win in straight sets is at plus 325. Noops, I'm going to let you go first. We have seen Rybakina get here barely. She's been involved in a lot of marathons. She's been on the right side of them. Collins has been the opposite. Dropped the first set to Pera and has destroyed everybody else in her path. I'm going to let you go first. First of all, do you think these odds are fair with Rybakina being a pretty decent favorite?
I think there's actually a little value here on Rybakina at minus 175. At that number or better, I had this a little bit closer to Rybakina minus 225. I think the market here possibly overreacting a little bit too. Collins being really impressive this week. But you go back and look through who she beat. Again, Bernarda Pera drops a set to her, a lucky loser, and then beats her 6-1, 6-1. Potapova, Avanescence, Kirstea, Caroline Garcia, Alexandrova. There's really only one or two players there that kind of impressed me. Alexandrova playing great tennis. That's a solid win. The rest of the group really underwhelming, where as you go back and look at Sakkari's run through here, Clara Towson, a good young player, did struggle there. Taylor Towson, the first time she's ever played Towson, a tough player to face the first time. She's someone that plays a really different style and has a great record. I think in career, she's something like 150 and 100 again, playing first time against a player. It's just really tough to adjust to that. Was able to beat Madison Keys in straights. That was pretty impressive. Sakkari, pretty much had her on the ropes at certain points during that match. Thought that was really impressive. She was able to come back from that. The Azarenka match, not too concerned there. She got tired basically during that second set. You could see her just really give up in the same way that I'm sure you're used to seeing Djokovic kind of punt a set in a Grand Slam. Rybakina was up a set there, kind of punted, basically let Azarenka take it 6-0, and did have to grind out the tiebreaker there at the end. But to win that tiebreaker 7-2 is really nice. I just think Lena understands what it takes to win these matches. One of mentally the strongest players in the WTA. And again, I talk about that kind of top group. It's Rybakina, Swiatek, and Sabalenka. They are head and shoulders better than just about everybody else. Maybe Goff sometimes kind of falls up into that group. Pegula kind of in that second tier there. But Collins really has struggled in her career against players like that. You look at her wins against the top 10. She was able to beat Caroline Garcia last year, who was somehow ranked 10th in San Diego. Maria Sakkari earlier that year in Montreal. Sakkari having a tough time. You got to go back to 2022. And again, it's kind of unimpressive wins against Garcia, but Dosa, she has never really beaten one of the absolute best WTA players. And I just don't expect that to start now. But I'm not going to lay the juice with Rybakina. I think the spread at 3 games is actually closer to right. There's a couple other markets that we talked about, kind of smaller stuff, but from kind of the top end, looking at these full game bigger markets, I think they're closer to right. Maybe a little bit of value on Rybakina, even though I don't love laying 175.
Yeah, I think in Rybakina's defense of those marathon matches, for the sake of this one, there is a day off in between, which is today. So with that being the case, she does have extra time to fully recharge her batteries to get ready for the final, which is always a concern anytime you have one player winning in straight sets all the time while the other players had to really just grind every match out. You worry about the stamina at the end. That should not be an issue because there is a day off today before the final tomorrow. So Rybakina should be fully fresh for this matchup. So with that being the case, I have to mention at least the head-to-head. And Rybakina's done pretty well in the head-to-head, but these matches have been competitive as it's 3-1 Rybakina. She has won each of the last 3, but all 3 meetings did go to a deciding set. So I do think with that being the case, do you think there's value in history repeating itself, or do you think that it might be a little bit of a trap, so to speak, where people will blindly follow the history and in reality Rybakina maybe wins comfortably in straight sets?
I think it speaks a lot to the matchup. Again, Rebecca is a player that understands the value of kind of letting sets go if she gets behind to save her energy for later. Collins is someone that has always been a great returner, has always been able to break back, catch up, and just knows how to level her game up to be competitive. So I expect this to go 3 sets. I think that there's some good angles for that. The total at 22.5 is something I'm not really interested in. It's going to be tough to win that in 2 sets, but I think there's some value in over 2.5 sets. And that's actually what I'm looking at for Rebecca. I think she wins that match. I do think it goes 3. So I played a little right back in it to win 2 sets to 1. That's plus 310. I think plus 300 or better is a really nice look for a little bit more of a long shot.
Yeah, I see a bit of a marathon as well here. Collins, as you said before, has been returning very well, and she looks extremely comfortable. Rybakina has been looking comfortable at times, but she's been involved in a bunch of marathons. You mentioned the potential punting of a set, which we have seen from Rybakina, especially against Azarenka in the semis. My question for you is, since you mentioned you did like Rybakina potentially on the spread in this matchup, is that possibility of a tank in the middle of a set going to scare you off of actually potentially betting the side, or do you feel good about it anyway?
That does bother me a little bit. Again, the spread's 3 games. I have it just about 3. I'd make it maybe, a cheap 3.5, something like that. So pretty close to market here. And like you said, if you think she's going to win in 2 sets, just bet the 2-0. I don't think you want to mess with those 3 games. This could be a double tiebreak kind of situation, which is rare in the WTA. But I think if she wins in 3 games, it has to happen in 2 sets.
Yeah, and for reference, once again, for Rybakina to win in straight sets, it is plus 155. So instead of laying the minus 110 with the spread, if you think it's going to end in straight sets, you can just take her to win in straight sets at a much better price while saving 60-something cents in the process. But for the sake of the overall matchup in general, do you have a particular, I'd say, path to victory for either player that you think might end up maybe a matchup between a forehand or a backhand, a serve versus a return? Any matchup you're looking for that you think is going to sway the entire matchup one way or another?
I need to see what Collins is able to do on Rebecca's serve. If Rebecca is solid, she's hitting her spots, not double faulting, not getting to second serves, it's going to be really difficult. Collins has to find a way to break in, and whether that is trying to be more aggressive and guessing which side Rebecca is going to serve, basically giving her one side and trying to force her to the other, or doing what we've seen players like Ostapenko do and just step way up and just kind of fire bombs, really. Just take the serve, and I'm going to hit it as hard as I can back into a really tiny area and try to win. So if Collins could find a way to do that early and make some hay in here, it's going to be a tight match. At the same time, Collins' serve has been good here, but not fantastic. And if she can't serve fantastically, Rebecca, who is not the best return player in the world, can find a way to break here pretty early. So I'm really focused on watching again as Rebecca serves against Collins. I think that's going to dictate the flow.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. The matchup I think I'm looking for is more involving the baseline, because I know Rybakina's forehand is solid, but we saw it occasionally self-destruct there in the Australian Open, which is why she lost that insane all-time super breaker in the third set against Blinkova. But the point is, I think I'm going to keep an eye on that, maybe the forehands matching up, because I think if Collins is going to win, she's going to have to try to outlast Rybakina on the baseline in some of these big rallies. And if Rybakina's forehand does short circuit, which it has done at times, then maybe Collins can outlast her in a couple of these long rallies and key points in order to win this match. For the sake of my thoughts on the match, I am going to lean to the over. I think you're going to see a close match. I do think 175, you can make an argument there might be a little bit of value on Collins, or at least maybe taking Rybakina alive, because you might get a cheaper line mid-match if you do think it's going to go 3 sets. So we'll see what happens there. But do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, the other bet I'm looking at here is the first set. One of my favorite bets to make in the WTA is first set overs. It's always easier when you go a little further down the menu, when you find a derivative. And I think when you look at a lot of WTA matches, there is a general flow where the first set is very long, the second set's a little bit quicker, and then maybe the third set's long if you make it that far. And as you go back through, I just want to double check. You mentioned the head-to-heads here very close. We've seen 3 of the 4 first sets go over 9.5 games. Looking here quickly, I believe at least half, if not more than half, the sets they've played have gone over. Rybakina is a very long first set player. As you look through this tournament, 6-4, 7-5 the last couple matches. Collins as well. So I'm expecting the first set to be really tight. Collins knows she has to be competitive early or else this is going to slip away from her. And at the same time, Rybakina is comfortable to serve through. So I think we're going to see 6-4, possibly even 7-5 here. So I took the first set over 9.5 games. That's minus 125, a little juicy, but I have it closer to minus 140. And then over 10.5 games, I believe that was right around plus 230. I have that closer to like plus 180.
Yeah, well, I definitely can see that being a bit of a longer first set based on the head-to-head history as well. I think that's going to do it, though, for the actual preview of the match. Now it is actually time to get into our favorite plays. I know we gave out a couple of plays, but we're going to give out our best bets, so to speak. If you want to bet them all, you can. We're going to give out our favorites anyway in a second. Before we get into any of that, though, do you want to take another quick word from our sponsors?
We're also brought to you by Hall of Fame Bets. Win bigger betting smarter this NBA season with Hall of Fame Bets. Sports Analytics platform for parlays, player props, and game lines. Research every NBA and soccer bet with historical stats and data. Enter any parlay idea into Hall of Fame Bets' revolutionary optimizer tool to get hit rates broken down by leg, as well as an expected probability for the entire parlay. Sort all players by hit rate for any bet to learn which players are hot and which picks have value. Stop betting in the dark and join over 30,000 users researching with Hall of Fame Bets to craft more intelligent, data-driven parlays. Download the app at HOPEBets.com. Use code SGPN to get 50% off your first month today. Start researching, start winning with Hall of Fame Bets.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the women's final in Miami. Now it's time to get into our favorite bets for the match. Time for the best bets. Now, Noops, for the sake of the actual format of the show, we call it a lock and a dog. The lock could be anything, could be a minus price. The dog, though, has to be something plus money, so keep that in mind. Since you are the guest, I'm going to let you go first. What is your lock for the matchup?
I'll go with the lock as first set over 9.5 games. Like I mentioned, expecting a really tough first set here. It's only minus 125. I have it closer to minus 140, and I did sprinkle the 10.5. But for my underdog, give me Rybakina to win this 2-1. That's plus 300 or better. Again, as we talked about, I think we both agree there's a good chance this goes 3. We both like Rybakina here. Put the two together. I think that's a really nice value.
Yeah, so for me, the dog's going to be basically the same as yours. I went a little bit safer, but I definitely like that angle. My lock's going to be a team total. I'm going to go with Rybakina. Team total over 12.5 games at minus 120. She's gone over in 6 straight. And I'm a firm believer of the don't fix what isn't broken philosophy. She's been involved in a bunch of marathons. Even in the one straight set match, she did win here against Madison Keys. Did win a set 7-5. So she can still win this if it goes straight sets. If you do get the long set, maybe you're over 10.5 games in the first set's going to pair well with the team total here if Rybakina wins a set 7-5 or 7-6, or it goes 3 and she gets there just based on the sheer amount of games we might end up seeing. Plus, she has gone over this number in each of the last 3 head-to-head meetings, so I do think that bodes well for her in this matchup. And kind of correlated to that team total and to your dog play, I am going to go with the over 2.5 sets at plus 130. I don't care who wins the match. I hope you end up being on the right side of it, but I'm going to play it safe here. Based on the amount of, I'd say, just inconsistent play from Rybakina, either from punting sets or not, she has split the first 2 sets in 6 of her last 7 matches. And I'm still not sure if the Azarenka match got graded as a win for over 2.5 sets or not, because they never played a point in the 3rd set, because she retired after the 2nd set. But still, that was not this event. That was a couple of tournaments ago. The point is, though, Rybakina has been able to come out firing, and then her level dips, and then she regains her form in the 3rd set. I'm going to try to capitalize on that. I think you might see them split once again, and it is worth mentioning that each of the last 3 head-to-head meetings have gone to a deciding set. So based on that, I once again see a long match correlated to my lock play, but I am going to go with my lock once again being Rybakina. Team total over 12.5 games at minus 120, and my dog will be on Collins and Rybakina over 2.5 sets at plus 130. That's going to wrap it up, though, for this actual episode. Noops, let the people know where they can find you.
As always, on the Twitter machine, @_Noops, talking tennis, talking hoops, a lot going on. And of course, first touchdown scorer bets once the football season finally returns.
UFL? You doing first touchdowns for
No,
UFL?
God, no. I don't even know if you can do that in UFL. I'd have to look. Do they have UFL
I hope you
first
can. This is
touchdown?
America. Come on, it's America. You got to be able to bet on first touchdown scores.
Shame
no
on
matter
me
what
for
the
not
league
even
is.
knowing that. I should know that.
To be fair, I don't think most books even know the UFL is going to be on anytime soon, but it is happening. So that's why I'm asking. I'm curious. You're going to see a lot of names in the UFL from quarterbacks that you forgot were even in the NFL at some point, or you vaguely remember them from college. I think I saw Matt Corral was starting a game, and I'm like, okay, I think we're good. Shea Patterson, of course, has jumped around a lot. You know, the classic guys who bounced around to 17 different other leagues at this point. But either way, point is, thank you, Noops, for coming on to the show. Hopefully, we can get you on again sometime soon. Until next time, though, a reminder, I'll be back once again later for the men's final, where I'll be previewing that one. And until next time, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Also forgot to mention, don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast on Spotify and Apple. Also, we have merch, fun fact, as we have shirts, we have mugs on the merch store. So if you want to support the show, you know how to do so. But until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.